Have you ever felt like, like you're caught between two worlds? Like you belong to both, but neither one really feels like home.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It's a strange feeling, right?
Yeah, it is.
That's kind of the essence of playing a half-elf in D&D, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So today we're going to dive into that whole dynamic, and we'll be pulling insights from LitRPG Reads as well.
Sounds good.
So have you had any experience with half-elf characters?
Oh, yeah, definitely. In my last campaign, I actually played a half-elf rogue, and she was constantly walking that line, between her human and elven sides.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it really added a lot of depth to her choices. She was always weighing like her human drive against her elven instincts. It was a really unique role-playing challenge.
Yeah, I bet.
For sure.
Well, the source material for this deep dive is an article by Isaac Hansen called Half-Elf Role-Playing Guide for Dungeons & Dragons, Embracing Dual Heritage. It was published on LitRPG Reads on March 3, 2025.
Okay.
And it's really packed with ideas for anyone who's intrigued by this classic D&D race.
I can't wait to dig into it.
Me too. So let's start with the basics. Half-elves have always had this special place in D&D lore, haven't they?
Oh, they definitely have.
What do you think it is about them that makes them so fascinating?
Well, I think it's that they embody this tension, between the ambition of humans and the kind of mystical nature of elves. And that alone just provides so much narrative fuel.
It really does. So the article talks about how half-elves are perceived differently across various D&D settings.
Right.
Why is it so important to think about where your half-elf character fits into the world?
Well, because it really shapes their experiences and opportunities. For example, in the Forgotten Realms, they're often seen as valuable diplomats. They're mediators, bridging the gap between humans and elves.
Yeah.
But in Eberron, they've actually formed their own independent communities. They're looking for a place where their dual nature is just accepted,
Makes sense.
Yeah. And even in Exandria, you see this kind of blend of admiration and suspicion towards them. So their integration into society becomes a key part of their story.
So let's say you're creating a half-elf character.
Okay.
Where do you even begin? And the article goes into some really interesting questions about identity that go way beyond just choosing a class and, picking your skills.
It does. And it's important to consider those questions. And you really need to ask yourself, which side of their heritage does your half-elf identify with more strongly?
That's a good question. Right.
Do they embrace both equally?
Okay.
Or do they resent one side? Maybe they had a bad experience,
Mm-hmm.
Exploring that internal conflict can really drive their actions throughout the campaign.
Yeah, I can see that. It adds a whole other layer to the character.
It really does.
So the article also suggests choosing a background that reflects their dual nature.
Right.
And it encourages thinking beyond the obvious choices, like going beyond just the typical, elf or human backgrounds.
Right.
It suggests things like noble, outlander, sailor, or even urchin.
I like that. It's thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
It is.
So how can those backgrounds shape a half-elf's motivations?
Well, each background can offer a unique perspective. For example, imagine a half-elf noble.
Oh, okay.
They could be struggling to prove their legitimacy in a human court, constantly facing questions about their lineage.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, or picture a half-elf outlander who finds solace in the wilderness. They're seeking refuge from all those societal pressures and judgments.
Yeah, those are good examples.
I try.
And the article provides this really cool table connecting specific backgrounds to potential motivations. It's a great tool.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah, especially for anyone who wants to really flesh out their character's backstory.
Yeah, I bet.
So I think it's interesting how those backgrounds can intersect with different D&D settings.
Oh, definitely.
Like, for example, imagine a half-elf sailor in the Forgotten Realms.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be navigating trade routes between human and elven ports. They're constantly dealing with these cultural differences and prejudices from both sides.
That's a cool concept.
Right.
Yeah.
Or picture a half-elf urchin in Eberron.
Okay.
They're using their street smarts and adaptability to thrive in, a bustling city like Sharn.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So each setting adds this unique layer to their experiences.
It does.
Now, I know everyone loves to talk about optimizing their character's abilities.
Of course, who doesn't?
So the article breaks down how to make the most of a half-elf's racial traits. And of course, it starts with the classic +2 to charisma.
Right.
Why is that bonus to charisma so important for half-elves?
Well, it's often what people focus on first, right? It makes them naturally gifted in social situations.
Yeah.
Whether they're diplomats or spies or just the life of the party. But I think it's more than just being charming.
Okay.
It's a reflection of their ability to navigate those complex social spaces between human and elven cultures.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of have to be able to read both sides and understand both sides to succeed.
And they get to add a +1 bonus to 2 other ability scores of their choice, right?
They do.
So you can really customize their strengths to fit their class.
Absolutely.
But Fey ancestry is another racial trait that's often overlooked.
Yes, it is.
So how can that be a game changer?
Well, having advantage on saving throws against being charmed and immunity to magical sleep can be huge,
Yeah.
especially in campaigns where mind control and illusions are a big threat. Your half-elf could become like the anchor of the party, you know? Resisting that mental manipulation that would just cripple other characters.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then the article delves into the different half-elf subtypes, right?
Yes.
Drow, high elf, and wood elf.
Yeah,
And each one brings something unique to the table,
they do.
both mechanically and thematically.
Yeah.
So it adds even more options for character development.
Exactly. Like, think about it. A Drow half-elf might embrace their dark vision and Drow magic. They could have a more shadowy, mysterious playstyle.
Yeah.
While a Wood Elf half-elf might excel at wilderness exploration and combat, they can use their speed and that Mask of the Wild ability to blend into the environment.
Cool.
It is.
And the high elf subtype gives you an extra cantrip and elven weapon training.
Right.
That's perfect for a Spellblade character.
Yeah, it's like a dream come true.
Right.
Yeah. Combining martial prowess with magic. It's awesome.
So choosing the right class for your half-elf goes beyond just mechanics, though.
Oh, it totally does. It's about aligning those abilities with their backstory and personality. Like, what kind of person are they? What do they want?
Yeah, and the article recommends classes like Bard, Paladin, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Ranger. Those seem to fit well with the whole half-elf experience.
They do. They really do. Like, imagine a half-elf bard using their charisma and artistry to bridge cultural divides.
Yeah.
They're telling stories about unity and understanding. It's beautiful.
That is. Or a half-elf paladin, embodying the ideals of both their human and elven heritage. They're striving for justice and balance.
It's powerful.
It is. I also love the idea of a half-elf sorcerer or warlock.
Oh, me too.
Like, did their magic come from a touch of elven ancestry? Or did they make a pact with some powerful entity that was drawn to their mixed heritage?
Right. It's such a great starting point for a backstory.
It is.
And you can do so much visually with it, too.
Absolutely.
Like, you could have a half-elf warlock whose patron is an ancient elven spirit.
Yeah.
And that gives them access to primal magic rooted in nature. Or maybe they made a bargain with a celestial being and they've got these radiant powers to fight off the darkness.
I love that.
It's cool, right? And those choices would impact their appearance, their abilities, their whole role in the party.
Speaking of roles, the article also looks at the social dynamics of being a half-elf, which I think a lot of players don't think about.
It's true they don't.
It examines how their relationships with other species can shape their whole story.
Yeah, and it's important to consider how different races might perceive a half-elf. Humans might be curious or envious. Elves might be wary or even dismissive. And then you've got orcs, tieflings, all the other races. They'll all have their own perspectives. So it adds this layer of complexity to those interactions.
For sure. So give me an example. Like, how could those different perceptions create interesting role-playing scenarios?
Okay, so imagine your half-elf is trying to earn the trust of an orc tribe.
Okay.
They've got to navigate their customs, prove their worth, overcome those preconceived notions about their mixed blood.
So that's a challenge.
It is. Or think about them navigating the social hierarchy of a tiefling city, where power and deception are everything.
Right.
Their dual heritage could be a blessing or a curse in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
There's just so much potential for drama and intrigue.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I found really interesting is that the article really encourages us to break free from half-elf stereotypes.
Yeah.
Like, it challenges players to create characters that defy those expectations and really stand out.
It's so important. It's easy to fall into that trap of playing the charming diplomat or the skilled archer. But this article is like, hey, think outside the box. Explore everything they can be.
So what are some examples of how to defy those stereotypes?
Okay, so imagine a half-elf who is raised by orcs.
Okay.
They've embraced brute strength and aggression over charisma and diplomacy.
That's a cool twist.
It is, right? Or what about a half-elf who rejects their magical heritage? They decide to master technology instead. They become this renowned inventor, blending elven ingenuity with human pragmatism to create amazing devices.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's about making them feel real and relatable, but also unexpected.
Yeah.
And the article actually provides a list of over 18 unique ways to defy those stereotypes. So it's a great resource for sparking creativity.
It sounds like it.
It is.
So we've talked about the narrative side of playing a half-elf.
We have.
But what about the mechanics?
Ah, yes, the nuts and bolts.
Exactly. Like, how do you create a half-elf that's both compelling and effective in gameplay?
That's the key, right? We want them to be memorable, but we also want them to be able to handle themselves in a fight or, contribute to the party's success.
Right. You need both.
Exactly. Well, half-elves actually have a surprising amount of versatility mechanically, like skill versatility, for instance.
Right.
It lets you pick 2 extra skills to be proficient in. It might seem kind of minor, but these extra skills can make a big difference.
Yeah, especially in certain situations, they can really open up new options for your character.
Totally.
So like a half-elf rogue
Yeah.
with persuasion and deception, they could be like a master of infiltration.
Oh, yeah, they'd be amazing at social manipulation, gathering information, sowing discord among their enemies, talking their way out of trouble.
I can see that.
Yeah. Or imagine a half-elf ranger who's good at survival in nature.
Okay.
They'd be the best at wilderness exploration, tracking, guiding the party through dangerous terrain, spotting hidden dangers. Those extra skills really become a core part of who they are.
It's almost like they become like a signature for that character. Now, speaking of rangers, the article specifically recommends that class for half-elves.
And it makes sense, right? I mean, they're connected to both the natural world and civilization.
Yeah, and there are so many cool ranger subclasses to choose from.
There are. You can really personalize your character. Like, the hunter subclass focuses on combat. The beastmaster lets you bond with an animal companion. And if you want to go for a darker feel with a drow half-elf, there's the gloomstalker.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they specialize in stealth and subterfuge. Perfect for those shadowy environments.
I like it. So they suggest other classes too, right? Not just rangers.
Oh yeah, definitely. They mention bard, paladin, sorcerer, warlock, even fighters and rogues. The point is, half-elves aren't limited to one specific role. They can be whatever you want them to be.
That's cool. So it really depends on how you develop their personality and their backstory.
Exactly. You got to find a class that fits who they are and what they want.
Now, the warlock idea really intrigues me. I mean, imagine a half-elf who made a pact with some powerful fae or celestial being.
Ooh, yeah. And their power is tied to their heritage somehow.
Right. That's like a whole other level of story potential.
It is. So many possibilities. What if their patron is like an ancient elven spirit bound to nature, granting them access to primal magic?
I like that.
Right. Or maybe their patron is a celestial being, giving them radiant powers to fight the darkness. Those choices would really shape who they are, how they fight, how they interact with the world.
That's really cool. Now, the article also throws out this really interesting question. What if your half-elf doesn't even know they're a half-elf?
Whoa!
Right.
That's a great hook.
Isn't it? Imagine they were raised among humans or elves, totally oblivious to their mixed heritage. Maybe they've always felt a little different, a little out of place. They never understood why.
Oh, that's so good. And then that moment when they discover the truth about their parents, their ancestry,
That would be huge.
life-changing.
Yeah,
It could make them question everything they thought they knew about themselves, where they belong.
totally.
Yeah.
And what if their human community rejects them when they find out about their elven blood? Or the elves see them as some kind of abomination?
Oh man, the drama.
Right. It's like this internal struggle to reconcile their identity. And that could drive all their choices from then on.
It adds so much depth to the whole half-elf story. It's not just about being an outsider. It's about self-discovery, prejudice, the whole nature of identity.
That's deep. It makes you think about how people deal with similar things in real life, too.
It does. It shows how D&D can be more than just a game.
Yeah, it's like a way to explore complex issues.
Yeah.
Challenge our own assumptions.
And connect with each other on a deeper level. It's amazing that a game can do all that.
So the article also talks about the social side of things, being a half-elf in a world where racial tensions can be high.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. It makes you think about how different species would see your character and how that can create opportunities but also obstacles.
Like, on one hand, they could be a bridge between humans and elves.
Right. Using their understanding of both cultures to find common ground, maybe even broker peace between warring factions. They could be a symbol of unity in a divided world.
I like that. But then on the other hand, they could face a lot of prejudice from both sides.
Absolutely. Seen as untrustworthy, not really belonging anywhere.
So how do they navigate that?
That becomes a big part of their story. Do they try to please everyone, or do they forge their own path, embrace being different?
Yeah, it's a tough choice. And the article keeps coming back to this idea of breaking stereotypes. Like, don't just play the typical half-elf.
Right. Be creative, explore the possibilities.
So what are some more examples of how to do that?
Okay, well, we talked about the half-elf raised by orcs. But what about a half-elf who's not charismatic at all? They're like a gruff, stoic warrior relying on brute force to get things done. Or maybe they're a brilliant inventor who rejects their magical heritage and focuses on technology instead. They combine elven ingenuity with human practicality to create amazing devices. It's all about thinking outside the box.
Exactly. It's about taking those classic tropes and turning them on their head.
I love that. It makes the character feel more real, less predictable.
And that's what makes D&D so fun. You can create anything you can imagine. There are no limits.
Yeah, it's all about telling a good story and having fun with it.
Exactly.
You know, it's amazing how this deep dive into half-elves has really shown how important storytelling is in D&D.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the numbers and the rules.
I know.
But in the end, it's the story that makes a campaign truly memorable.
It really is.
It's those moments, those characters that we remember long after the game is over.
I agree. And half-elves, they just have so much potential for great stories.
They do. Their whole identity, that duality, it's a rich tapestry for narrative. It makes you think about those big questions too, you know? Belonging, acceptance, finding your place in a world that wants you to pick a side.
And it's interesting how those themes resonate with real life too. Like, we all struggle with those things in some way.
That's true. It's pretty amazing how a game can make you think about that kind of stuff.
It is. It shows how D&D can be more than just a game.
So the article wraps up by talking about half-elf NPCs
Oh, yeah.
and how they can really enrich a campaign world.
Absolutely. Sometimes dungeon masters forget how much impact even a minor character can have.
I know.
But a well-developed NPC, they can add so much depth and intrigue. And half-elves are perfect for that because they can bridge those different cultures.
So give me some examples, like how could a dungeon master use half-elf NPCs effectively?
Well, let's say you have a half-elf innkeeper. They could be a source of information about the town, the local lore, things other characters might not know.
Yeah, that's cool.
Or a half-elf merchant. They might have unique goods, connections to both human and elven markets. It adds flavor to the world.
It does. And what about like a half-elf diplomat?
Oh yeah, they could be trying to broker peace between warring factions, using their understanding of both sides to prevent bloodshed. They could represent hope in a world full of conflict.
That's really powerful.
It is. Even just brief encounters with well-developed NPCs like that can make the world feel more real, more alive.
So to all the dungeon masters out there, don't forget about those half-elf NPCs. They can add so much to your stories.
Definitely. Sprinkle them in and see what happens. You might be surprised.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I just feel really excited about the potential of half-elf characters.
Me too. There's so much more than just stats on a sheet. They're complex individuals with their own stories to tell.
I hope this has inspired everyone to create their own half-elf character or use them in their campaigns in new ways.
Yeah. Have fun with it. Experiment. See where your imagination takes you.
A huge thank you to LitRPG Reads and Isaac Hansen for the fantastic article that sparked this conversation.
And don't forget, LitRPG Reads has tons of other great articles too by authors like Paul Bellow, so check them out.
And while you're at it, let us know what you think. Share your thoughts on half-elves in the comments. Tell us about your favorite half-elf character concepts, your most memorable encounters. We love hearing from you.
We do. So until next time, keep those dice rolling and keep those stories coming.
Absolutely. See you next time.